Hi, I'm Julieann Hartman, and welcome to The Journey. Today's show is about my friend Colleen Iammarino. Now, Colleen had a very crazy life growing up. Not only did she have a similar background like mine with an alcoholic father, very dysfunctional, but she was pregnant at 15. She was married several times to men that were very abusive to her. It is an incredible story that you don't want to miss. Not only did she have all of those problems, but she also ended up with the worst back pain that anybody could ever live with, screaming in pain most days with her back. She was finally diagnosed with RSD. And so because of that, she had to take many medications to try to just at least keep her in a state where she could function, at least just be alive. So I can't wait for you to see part one of Colleen Iammarino's story. Well, Colleen, thank you so much for coming on The Journey. These people that are watching this show are going to be so blessed by your story.
Thank you so much. What a privilege and an honor just to be here. Thank you.
Well, what's so cool about this is that we kind of have similar backgrounds as far as our childhood goes. So I want you to go into your story a little bit about your family and where you're from too. And, what was the dynamic going on and what was your belief system at home?
Okay. Well, I'm originally from Northeast Ohio. I was born and raised there, and I lived there my entire life until about almost 5 years ago, until we moved to Colorado. And in my family, I had two older brothers and an older sister, so I was the baby of the family. They were
Me
not
too.
expecting, yeah, they were not expecting me. So, but God knew I would be here, right? But they didn't. And Unfortunately, things were going very wrong with my mom and my dad. Now, of course, I didn't know this until later in life, but my mom and dad they were in the middle of a divorce when my mother found out she was pregnant with me. And so when that came to light, back then they said, there's no way you're getting a divorce until you have this child, and we highly recommend that you try to, get back together and make things work, right? And so the divorce proceedings were off. Here I come. My dad doesn't think I belong to him because,
What? Wait, hold on. That in itself, there's a trust issue going on. Why
yeah.
would you think you belong to him?
Well, my dad was an alcoholic
Okay.
and he drank a lot, and he was never open, about what was going on in his life or what made him go down this path or whatever. But he drank a lot. My mom was working outside of the home, to try to help with the finances. And even though my dad knew that's why, she was working at that time, it was like women trying to move forward like that was a really big deal. And, I think it made him feel insecure, like he wasn't enough. And, so he would act out and then she's acting out. And it was constant screaming and fighting. And now both my older brothers and my sister, have shared stories with me that I didn't know about because, I hadn't been born yet. And so it was not good. They were beaten a lot physically and just the fighting and everything. And then, so when they found out that my mom found out she was pregnant, of course, my dad accused her it was by someone else. And
Right.
it wasn't. It wasn't. All you had to do is when I started getting older is look at me and look at my dad, right? But it's like he just couldn't give in, So I'm sure the enemy at that time just bombarded his mind with thoughts, and so because of that, we did not have a relationship, together because he would look at me and think, well, you're not mine. Why should I have anything to do with you? Right.
Oh, God.
So, it was, I didn't realize that though until I was a little bit older, right? Because when I was younger, I remember him holding me. I see, him holding me in pictures and things like that. But that's when I later found out as I started getting a little bit older. So they did try to work things out for a while, after they had me. But by the time I was 6, 7 years old, man, it was like World War 20 in our house. And it was out of control. Both my brothers now, because they're 7, 8, and 9 years older than I am. So by the time I'm getting 6, 7, 8 years old, both my brothers are going to Vietnam. So they're leaving home. My
Yeah.
sister ends up living with my dad. So she left. So now it's just my mom and I. So for a couple of years, she tried to make it work, with the house and everything like that. But now, she's got her own small little income trying to make this work, and it just wasn't. So by the time I reached 11, my mom just said, honey, you got to go live with your grandma. I've got to get this house sold, and I was like, what do you mean I have to go live with my grandmother? You're my mother, but
Right.
she couldn't do it. And so I went to live with my Grandma Birdie was her name. And so before I get into that, to kind of back up then, my dad decided at some point, after he got out of the service, that he tried to go to I don't know if it was a Methodist or a Lutheran church or something like that. And when he went there, of course, it was like at 9 o'clock at night and their doors were locked. And down the street was a Catholic church. And he walked down there and the doors were open. He said, well, apparently this is where God is. And so
Mhm.
he told my mom, we are going to raise our children Catholics. And so that's where that came from. And later in life, I did have a conversation with him, and because I said to him, I said, why did you want us to be raised Catholics, and he told me that story, and I said, you chose a religion based on a church door being open? And he said, yeah, I did. If they thought that it was important for people to come and know God, they should have had the door. That's just how my dad was, just like, oh, so opinionated, And but anyway, now by that time I was already a Christian, right? But I was just curious, like, why would you put us through that? And so please forgive me, anybody that's Catholic. I know there's a lot of Catholic believers, right, that love Jesus, but man, not when I was growing up. It was rules, regulations, and man, if you got out of line, God was going to get you. He was going to hurt you. All these terrible things that we grew up thinking about God. And so that's kind of how I grew up.
Well, a similar background with that because we were told that, God was a punisher. And so, we weren't Catholic, but we had gone to Catholic churches when it was, Christmas or Easter.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so and that was back then. I know things are different now.
Yeah.
But back then it was very strict. And then you didn't even know what they were saying because they were speaking another language.
Latin.
Yeah. So you didn't know what they were
Yeah.
saying.
It
So, all
was.
right, then now you go well, let me ask you a question. What does
Mhm.
it feel like to be shipped off to grandma's house? Like, did you feel, were you sad? Did you and your mom have this great relationship and now you're devastated because she's like, okay, bye. I can't deal with you right now. You'll have to go to grandma's.
No, we didn't have a really super close relationship. And, I never understood why as a young girl. She would do special, nice little things for me. So we would have like every Friday night at our house was a party. But that was for my two older brothers and my sister, right? They were so much older, and she allowed them to have their friends over to have a party. Excuse me. And so on those nights, I got to go upstairs into her bedroom and I'd get a ice cream sundae or something like that. So, she did nice little things, for me and for my brothers and sister. But when when the other kids started leaving, my two brothers going to Vietnam and my sister going to live with my dad, I mean, it just crushed her. She was like, all she could see was her whole family falling apart. And so now here I am. But for her, she's just trying to deal with her own life, you know, issues. And, she was raised Christian to know Christ. But then for my dad, right, she said, okay, I'll, convert to Catholicism. So I can only imagine the fight on the inside of her
Yes.
heart, right? Knowing that Jesus is her salvation, but yet going to church, it's never talked about that Jesus is your salvation in the Catholic Church, not when I grew up anyway.
Right.
And so by the time that she was telling me I'm going to go live with, my grandmother, um, she was pretty messed up. She was like, felt like a failure. It was all about her friends now because they were the people around her encouraging her. She was all about trying to promote now a career and do something with herself. And then she couldn't afford the house, and so that's why she was like, "You've got to go somewhere where I know you're going to be taken care of," right? So I think from her deep down in her heart, she knew that grandma would take care of me. All right, I'd be fed, I'd have a roof over my head, and she wouldn't let anything really bad happen to me. But at the same time, I was like, I felt totally rejected. I'd already felt rejected by my dad, but then my brothers left and my sister left, and not understanding anything. I think the devil at that point, even when you're young, he starts planting these seeds in your head, like,
Well,
boy,
Colleen, that's the time to get to you when you are young.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
you don't know. And I was just going to say that you see how he just started laying that foundation for you to fail.
hmm,
That's really because just that rejection at such an early age like that, which I totally understand because I had it too.
yeah,
Now think of it this way, you're rejected not just by your dad but by your mom as well.
hmm,
So so now you become this orphan
yeah.
almost.
Yeah, you kind of feel like that,
Yeah.
and I get to my grandmother's house and I know she loves me, but she's already pretty well in age. Because like I said, I was like, they didn't think they were going to have any more children. So, my mom was in her 30s when she had me. And so, I go to live with grandma, and I'm like, okay, so now what? And then she tells me I have to stay up till a certain time because I can't get up early in the morning because they sleep in. And, now my whole little life is like turned upside down. And I'm like, what do you mean I have to stay up till the 11 o'clock news is over? I'm like, I could care less about the news. What are you doing to me? Right. But so now I had this whole new set of rules, right? That I'm like, oh my gosh. And uh, so anyway, I got through that somehow. I think it was because I met some new friends, right? And so right at that time is when my mom also pulled me out of the Catholic school and put me in a public school. So, I mean, I went from wearing uniforms every day, structure. This is what you do when you get in there. You do this after that. You go to mass then, and then you go back to your class, and then you do this. And if you do that, man, put the knuckles out. You get it. And I mean, all this stuff. And then she says, now you're going to go to a public school. And I'm like, what's that? So, I get thrown into a public school, and I'm like a little flower on the wall. I have no idea what to do. People are talking about things that I've never heard of, all this stuff. And I'm like, and people think I'm really tall for my age. So between 11 and 12, I was almost as tall as I am now.
Which
So I
is
was
which
pretty
is
close.
what? How tall are you?
I was almost 5'7"
Oh my
when I was
gosh.
in sixth grade. And then I only grew another inch, inch and a half, right after that. So, I mean, I'm up here and everybody, I feel like the giant, And but I managed to meet a couple of, friends that were in the neighborhood. But that's when the devil just really got into my life, and learning how to steal, lie, because my friends, that's what they did. And I was like, oh my gosh, you shouldn't lie. You'll go to hell if you lie. All these things. And they're like, who told you that? Right. And so my life went through a whole nother phase of being with my grandmother. Right.
And
But
probably your grandma was older, so she really wasn't paying as much attention as your.
exactly. Oh no, she did. And she came from a much older generation. She came from, working in World War One,
Yes,
and so she was all about hoarding everything because she was so afraid she would never have enough.
right.
And but thank God that my mom did send me to live with her. That was the very first person I ever heard talk about Jesus loving you. I'd never heard that before in Catholic school, Catholic church, nothing. And but my mother told her that she was never to take me to her church. And she was like, what do you mean? Why not, Dorothy? It's like, she said, she is a Catholic and she is not going to your church. Well, she snuck me to church a couple of times, right? Because I wanted to go. As soon as I heard my mom say I couldn't do it, I was like, why not? I want to go. And so, that's sin, right? When you're sin conscious, it's like you go for it. And so she did. She let me come a couple of times. And I remember the biggest difference is that Jesus was not on their cross. In the Catholic Church, Jesus was still hanging on the cross. But here I was like, why is the cross empty? Where's Jesus? I mean, isn't that funny? As a little girl, you're like, where's Jesus?
Yes.
Isn't he supposed to be there? And, and that was the first time I heard anything very different outside of what I had known before. So those were the first, I think, little seeds that the Lord was planting in my heart. But it didn't mean anything to me because I she couldn't keep taking me, right? There was and I never accepted the Lord. I didn't even know what that even meant.
Wow.
But those were like some of the first seeds of knowing that there was something different besides Catholicism.
So now you're learning a little bit about Jesus, but now you have a friend group that's probably pulling you more towards the sinful life.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
you said you were stealing. Were you also drinking, doing drugs, and all that stuff?
Not yet. Thank God
Not
not.
yet.
But that happened a couple years later. So I basically was with my grandmother from 11 till little past 12. I wasn't quite
Oh,
13.
so just almost a year and a half then.
Yeah, about a year and a half. Because then my mom found a small little apartment. And, she would come and visit, not a lot, but she would come and visit, sometimes stay a weekend, but most of the time it was all for her. It was work and her friends, and so she knew I was with my grandmother, so she was off on her own. And of course, then it angered me. I felt rejected, and I was like, why don't you want to be around me? But when I got saved and the Lord started revealing things to me, I started seeing things in a different light, right? And going, oh my gosh, she must have been so tormented.
Yeah.
The same with my dad. The torment of, first of all, not my dad not knowing Christ, my mother knowing him, but now she's not going to live for him because she's going to do this. I can't even imagine what was going on in their hearts and their minds, right? And then, you throw the devil in there and drinking and, all this stuff, and their life just exploded. So she comes back, says, I've got a small little apartment. We're going to move there and it's going to be a lot better, but by that now this time I'm pretty much connected to my grandmother. Even though I'm doing wrong things, I trust my grandmother. I feel like I had a safe place to be, right? But now she's going to pull me out of that and now take me to this little apartment, and a part of town that I've never lived in before. And I'm like, but mom, I mean, where am I going to go to school? I don't know anybody. Now I'm going from 6th grade to 7th grade,
Which is
right?
tough.
Really vulnerable
Yeah.
time, right?
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm tall. And, now
It's
my
a
mom,
weird age anyway.
weird age, yes. And
Imagine
so,
me, I was redheaded back in the 70s. That
yeah,
didn't go over well.
yeah. No, anything anybody can find to pick on you about, they'll pick on you about. I know, trust me. Because I was real skinny, and so they made fun of me being skinny, and my teeth were really bad because they never took us to the dentist, and and then I had to get glasses. Oh my gosh, I mean, it was just one thing after another. Well, so my mom tells me, well, honey, it'll be okay. Some of my friends that I have met now, they have daughters and sons right around your same age. And I'm like, great. I just want to go back to my old friends, right? And so she introduces me, takes me to her friends' houses, right? So I meet some of their children, only to find out that they are alcoholics. I mean, literally passing out at 7, 8, and 9 o'clock at night because they've drank a whole fifth of whatever it is that they're drinking. And then, their daughter in this one particular family, she's like, come on, don't worry about it. They do that every night. I'm like, what do you mean they do this every night? She's like, come on, just come on back to my bedroom. She's got 6 pack of beer. She's got her cigarettes, she's got pot. And I'm like, my mind is exploding, this little Catholic girl that just got thrown into public school 2 years ago, right? And then now here I am, and I'm getting ready to go into junior high, and I'm, just meeting this girl, and she's like going, what do you mean you don't smoke? You don't drink? You don't do? I'm like, no, why would I do that? And so starts the peer pressure, right?
Yes.
And then she introduces me to other of her friends that, of course, are doing the exact same thing. Next thing you know, by the time I'm 14, I'm drinking, I'm smoking, and I'm smoking pot. And I'm like, and my mother doesn't even notice anything, right? And I'm like, I'd come home, and I mean, trust me, I knew that there was something wrong with me. She's like, how you doing? And I'm like, I'm good. I'm gonna go to my room. Okay. I mean, that's just how it was. She
Yeah.
was, going bowling 2 and 3 nights a week with her friends, working and, wanting to grow in her career. And I mean, we just kind of went like this. And that was it.
So now what about, because with all the drinking, smoking, and all that, usually comes the boys. So what happened with that? They all go hand in hand, of course.
Well, yeah. But that didn't come until 15, or actually 14. I was still 14, but I was about to turn 15. And I met this guy, just cute as could be, and
In
of course,
school.
in school. Now he was 2 years ahead of me, and so I was like, oh my gosh, this. I'm in what now? I'm in going into ninth grade, and so he must have been in 11th or 12th. I think maybe he was getting ready to graduate. And of course, I had never sexually done anything. I didn't even know. I knew nothing, like zero. I didn't even know about kissing or anything.
And back then, nobody talked about it
Oh no,
at
no,
all.
ever, ever. And so what happened then was, he and I started dating, and he just really started pressuring me. And I'm like, I don't even know what this is. And he's like, oh, well, don't worry, I'll show you, you know. And I was so naive and felt so rejected by my family. But, here's this guy who's showing me all this attention and telling me how pretty I am. And, oh, he'll love me forever. Right. And I mean, my head is swirling around. but seriously, I didn't know anything. And so, I ended up, having sex with him. And it was one of the most, it was the worst experience ever. I was like, I don't even understand why anybody wants to do this. I was so messed up. And, and then, my girlfriend, of course, asking me, so did you do it? I'm like, do what? Right? And so, of course, I made the mistake of saying yes, telling
Ah,
her. And then she says, now, did you take anything? I said, what do you mean, did I take anything? She goes, well, did he have protection? I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about, right?
oh my
And she
gosh,
says, well,
Colleen.
you can get pregnant. And I went, what? And my poor friends, they're like, you must have grew up under a rock, girl. And I said, well, apparently I did. But, and so now I'm going, pregnant? That's how you get pregnant? Are you kidding? Well, I got pregnant.
Ah,
So now here I am at 15. And boy, I knew something was up. And I mean, I was not feeling good. And first my mom's like, well, you've got some kind of a flu. We'll take you to the doctor.
oh, because you had
I
morning sickness?
I was like, no, 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 that's okay. I'll be fine. I'll be fine. Well, I kept throwing up. And so she's like, we're going to the doctor. So we go
Oh,
to the
God.
doctor. Yeah. And so the doctor goes, so, well, what's your symptoms? I'm telling, this guy, and he's like, I don't think you have the flu. And I said, what do you mean? So he asked me the big question, are you sexually active?
Oh my gosh, in front of your mom?
In front of my mother. And I said, well, I said, I did one time. Of course, my mother about fainted. And he
Mhm.
goes, honey, I think you're pregnant.
Oh my gosh, Colleen.
So my mother, not being a very compassionate, loving person, did not take that news very kindly. I mean, neither did I. My head was spinning. I'm like, what does this even mean, right?
Now, did you have a feeling you were pregnant, or he confirmed it?
Yeah, no, I knew something.
Oh,
Something was different, inside me. I just didn't know because, now my girlfriend's telling me I could get pregnant, and of course at the beginning, nothing, right? And then I start feeling all this weirdness and stuff. And, I have nobody to talk to. I don't have anybody to ask, well, what did you feel like when you were pregnant? Well, why are you asking at 15 years old, right? You know what I mean? And so now the real devastation starts to happen because now my mother is like, who's this boy? How could you do this to me? Because now I was shaming the family. My mother's hopes was she was taking me to New York so I could be a model. Because I was doing modeling work for her where she worked at. And at the big mall, I would do modeling shows and all kinds of stuff because I was tall, had long blonde hair, and I was skinny, you know. And so that's what my mom just assumed I should do for the rest of my life, even though I didn't like it. But it made my mom happy, and I got free clothes. I was like, good deal. But now, I've ruined her life, her reputation, and I've ruined my life. So she made sure that I understood that. So then all the talk started about, well, you're going to have an abortion. And of course, I'm like, first of all, what is that? I didn't know. And when I found that out, I went, wait a minute. Wait a minute. So you're telling me I have a child inside of me, but you're telling me to go kill it. And of course, she was like, well, no, I'm telling you to have an abortion. And I'm like, so if I'm not pregnant after her, I have an abortion. Something is happening to that child. And she's like, well, I guess so. But this is what we're doing. And I went, no, we're not. So I go running to my boyfriend and telling him this. And he goes, yeah, my dad is saying you have to get an abortion. And now I'm looking at him like, what? And I said, so what are you saying? You know? And he was like, well, they told me I can never see you again. Like, okay, now by this time, seriously, I don't even know what to do. I'm like ready to run away from everything and everybody. And so his parents meet my mother, and they all decide I'm going to get an abortion.
Okay, now I'm going to stop you there because we're out of time.
Oh, okay.
Yes, so this is that cliffhanger. What did Colleen do? So we are going to be back next week with the continuation of this amazing story. Thank you so much, Colleen, for joining us, and we will be back to see you next week.
Thank you so much, Julieann.
Okay, there you have it. We left you with a cliffhanger, and I'm not going to tell you what happened, but God is so good. And what a story. You know, what's so crazy is that I relate so much to her story because it's a lot like mine. This is so awesome. You just wait. Part 2 is coming up. You don't want to miss it. And thank you guys so much for always joining us Saturday mornings to watch the journey. This has been an incredible experience, not just for me, the interviewer, or the people that are actually being interviewed, but for the viewers as well. Remember, we dig deep into testimonies. And the way you can help us make that happen is to go to healingjourneystoday.com and donate. Help us bring these shows to you so that everyone that watches these shows can be set free by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. Thank you so much.